This is it, the Dandy Dozen football, Millennial style. Happy hobby, I'm David Gonis, and we are back talking about the Dandy Dozen, my top 12 football cards, this time from the Millennial area, which means post 2000, 2000 and beyond. We got some really great players in here, some players that are still playing. There's a lot of them, actually. And we got some veterans that you may have heard of before, but we've already done the Dandy Dozen Vintage Football Series, we've done the Dandy Dozen Modern Football Series. Like, these are the 12 best players whose cards you want to collect. Not necessarily the 12 best cards, but the 12 best players whose cards you want to collect. So we're obviously the rookie cards are the best. Those are the ones you want to get the most. But a lot of times when you're working with a limited budget, which is what we do here, we could be happy with the second year card, or maybe it's the third year card. But essentially, these are the guys you want to collect from these different eras in football card collecting, and also now we're getting into the current years of collecting. So that's what we do. We also did the Dandy Dozen for baseball. This is one of my most popular videos of all time. So make sure you check that out. And we also did the millennials and the modern for baseball. And then next we're going to be doing the NBA vintage Dandy Dozen. That'll be the next video. But right now it's all about millennials football cards. Who are the best players to collect from the past 20 plus years? Number one, it's not that big of a surprise. I mean, it's Tom Brady. I mean, you knew I was going to say Tom Brady. There's a handful of great rookie cards of Tom Brady's you could collect, but I was always on the other end of the debate. I always thought Peyton Manning was the better quarterback of the two. And then that Super Bowl against Atlanta when Tom Brady led them back 28 points down. That comeback, uh, really, that cemented his status as the greatest quarterback of all time. And oh yeah, he then won another Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So look, 7 Super Bowls, tons of records like passing yards in career, passes in a career, completions in a career. He has more Super Bowl MVPs, 5, than the next quarterback that has Super Bowl wins. Can you imagine that? He has 5 to their 4, Joe Montana and Terry Bradshaw. So that's pretty impressive. Now, from what I understand, around farms around the nation, is the best goat in a herd of goats is now referred to as the Tom Brady. You can look it up. And number 2 on the list, right behind Brady, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this guy, he came out in 2017. He lit the world on fire. Actually, it was 2018 when he lit the world on fire. Can you imagine if he would have had one more season in 2017 to really rack up some stats? This guy's fantastic. He came around just before the card collecting boom exploded again. So all card collectors, sports card collectors specifically, want a Patrick Mahomes rookie card. They need a Patrick Mahomes rookie card. So it's understandable. He's only 27 years old. He's on a team that's built to be good for the next few years. So you could definitely see some more Super Bowl appearances, if not Super Bowl wins, for him as he chases down Mr. Brady, which I don't think is going to be possible, but he could definitely be in the conversation for the top 5 quarterbacks ever if he wins another Super Bowl. And now we move on to number 3, Peyton Manning. I already mentioned him earlier. This guy, he's like the Terry Bradshaw of this generation. He was a superstar, phenomenal NFL quarterback that won some Super Bowls, and then he's now parlayed that into becoming a TV personality, a producer. Like, he's got a lot of stuff going on with Omaha Productions and such. So he's definitely someone who's going to be in the limelight for the next decade or so at least. And the Manning name itself is pretty collectible. And now they have Arch Manning coming up. So Peyton's definitely going to be one of the top 5 collectibles for years to come in the football card world. And number 4, and let's be clear, there's a huge drop off from the top 3 to number 4, which is Aaron Rodgers, in my book, is the number 4 most collectible. Played with Green Bay all those years, won a Super Bowl, only one Super Bowl, but still a phenomenal fantasy quarterback, won a bunch of MVPs. He's a great player, don't get me wrong. there's a lot of people that aren't crazy about Aaron Rodgers, and he doesn't really seem to care if they're not crazy. So that kind of does inhibit his collectability just a little bit. And now he's going to the Jets. If he wins a Super Bowl with the Jets, he could start climbing maybe another notch on this ladder. We'll see, because New York, biggest media market in the world, that could do it. Number 5, Drew Brees. Now, this was originally drafted by the San Diego Chargers, eventually moved on to the Bayou, New Orleans, and put together a 20-season NFL career. Now, a lot of people could make the case that Brees could actually be right behind Tom Brady, because he's basically right behind Tom Brady in a ton of career passing records with passing yards and completion, so passing touchdowns. So Brees is really a top 5 player in the past 20 years, certainly, and maybe top 10 quarterback all time. But he's definitely collectible. Doesn't have a ton of Super Bowl wins, but he's always affable. Everyone always liked Drew Brees. Not a lot of bad things to say about that guy. He's a good guy to collect. But right behind Drew Brees is another B, Joe Burrow. Now, this guy could skyrocket up this list really quickly. He's only entering his 4th NFL season. He's already been to the Super Bowl once. I'll tell you what, this guy won the Heisman Trophy in 2019. That was not too long ago at all. Was the 2020 #1 NFL draft pick for the Bengals. He ended up being the comeback player of the year the following season because he blew out his knee at the end of his rookie season. This guy, he's been pretty phenomenal, and he's got a pretty good team around him. Great coach, great offensive-minded coach. So if he wins a Super Bowl in the next year, he could definitely leapfrog a couple of these players above him. And number 7, I got Josh Allen. He's coming off a disappointing 2022 season, but before that, I mean, Josh Allen was a really popular guy. If he brought Buffalo a championship, I think his Q rating, as they say, it would skyrocket. You'd see him on Billboard. You see him everywhere, on every product in the land. I'd see him. And number 8, Joe Burrow's draft mate, Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert, he's just a couple notches below Joe Burrow, in my opinion. He's kind of like the Marino to Joe Burrow's Joe Montana. You know, in the 80s and the 90s, there's always the debate, who's the greatest quarterback? Is it Joe Montana or is it Dan Marino? And people were in different camps on that. I feel like that could be what we're looking at going forward between Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. Both came out in the same class, of course, but Justin Herbert is in a much bigger media market. If he ends up doing something in LA, Super Bowl titles there, he's going to blow up, and he may end up surpassing Joe Burrow if Joe Burrow doesn't add a Super Bowl title to his name. All right, number 9. You may have noticed a lot of quarterbacks on this list. This is our last quarterback in the Dandy Dozen. Number 9, Kurt Warner. Now, the problem with Kurt Warner is he started his winning his NFL superstardom, came pretty late in his career, 6 seasons after he came out of college. So he didn't quite have the build-up and the excitement around him that these other superstars did. So the ramp up was a little steeper, if you know what I'm saying. But Warner is a great story. I mean, there's a movie about him, for goodness sake. So that's a pretty good movie too. And now he's a solidly entertaining studio analyst for NFL Network. And I think that's something that really does help the collectability of a lot of these players, is just being on TV, and newer collectors and younger people seeing them and recognizing them and knowing that maybe they didn't see him play, but they know this guy is good and is a superstar. He's obviously talking about younger players like he knows something. So I think that raises their collectability level a bit. Plus, Kurt Warner was on the greatest show on turf, one of the all-time greatest NFL offenses ever. So he's got to get some a nod for that. And number 10, our first non-quarterback, Joe Burrow's receiving teammate, Ja'Marr Chase. Now, a former LSU player. We got another LSU receiver coming up too. Spoiler alert. But Ja'Marr Chase, fantastic for the Bengals. And if we think great things are ahead for Burrow, then that means great things are ahead for Ja'Marr Chase, who catches a lot of his touchdown passes. Chase owns several rookie receiving records, and he's just now entering his 3rd season. Now, Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase could be the Joe Montana and Jerry Rice of the 2020s. And then sticking with LSU and wide receivers, we go back 1 year. Justin Jefferson, who came out the year before Ja'Marr Chase. Now, Justin Jefferson, he's the youngest player to ever lead the league in both reception and receiving yards. If the Vikings were somehow able to get a great quarterback in that huddle, things could really take off for Justin Jefferson's collectability. And number 12, the last player on my Dandy Dozen Millennials NFL list is LaDainian Tomlinson, LT2. LT is Lawrence Taylor. LaDainian Tomlinson, LT2, we'll call him. And if you can just imagine how much the game has changed in just the past 15 years. LT in the mid 2000s, he really did help create the fantasy football industry into the bajillion-dollar industry it is now. He was the number one pick for more times than any other player in NFL history. He was the number one fantasy pick in leagues more than any one player ever. I've done the stats. This is not a joke. He is the number one player. From 2003 to 2008, he was the number one overall average draft position, the ADP. He was the number one pick for 5 of those 6 years. That's pretty crazy. All right, so now we talk about a handful of players that did not make the list, but they're notable. They're notable guys that could jump up into this list at some point. Lamar Jackson. Who knows what's going to happen with him in Baltimore? Maybe by the time you're watching this, he's already changed teams, or he's already, who knows what's going on there. But Lamar Jackson's a fantastic player. Obviously, he's a great dual threat. He's a great passer. Just fantastic player. But I think part of that worry that the Ravens have about signing him to a huge contract and long extension is the injury scare. So it's tough to kind of rely on him also from a collectability standpoint. If you're considering someone like, say, Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes, you're going to go with the guy that probably is going to stay healthier for longer. And then some of these other guys, Marvin Harrison and Terrell Owens, these guys owned the 2000s and late 90s, fantastic wide receivers. What about the two best tight ends, Rob Gronkowski and Tony Gonzalez? Unfortunately, tight ends just aren't that collectible. Definitely top 20 in the Millennials, but these two guys are all-time some of the all-time great. Throw in Travis Kelce, he should be in there as well. Fantastic tight ends. Maybe in the future, maybe in the next few years, those guys chip into the top 12. But when 9 of your top 12 are quarterbacks, it's hard to make room for tight ends and not other wide receivers or other running backs. And speaking of other running backs, Edgerrin James, Terrell Davis, like two, again, phenomenal fantasy players. But from a collectability standpoint, their careers just really didn't last as long as a lot of receivers, or definitely not as long as quarterbacks. So it just hurt their collectability a little bit. And if you're going to talk about injuries and short shelf lives, Todd Gurley, Saquon Barkley, which he's still good, he's still coming around, he's still playing well, so we'll see. But Arian Foster, Le'Veon Bell, I mean, these guys are great running backs, should have been super collectible. I still like to collect them because I like to collect fantasy players, like great fantasy players, but they're super cheap. They're not that expensive, but they're guys you're not going to want to invest too much money into at this point. So there you have it. There's my Dandy Dozen, the Dandy Dozen for the Millennial football era. Now, I want you to tell me in the comments, where did I make a mistake? Where did I go wrong? Where did I misstep? I know you got some opinions. That's okay. I want to hear them. There's been plenty of good debates on these Dandy Dozens. I love it. Let's hear it some more. Who do you think should have been higher? Who do you think should have been lower? Who do you think should have been on the list? Who wasn't in the notables list that I should have had? I know there's some. Travis Kelce is definitely one that squeezed it there at the last second. He's a great one. And don't forget, the next video in this series is the NBA Vintage Dandy Dozen. The 12 players from the NBA that you're going to want to collect from the golden era. We're talking the 60s and 70s. These are the guys you're going to want to collect pre-1979 for the NBA. But whatever you do, let me know in the comments and make sure you have a happy hobby.